Hello, Snapchat family. Blessings to everyone, and hope that everyone's doing well. Flew in yesterday from California to Michigan to my parents' house, and before I left, I recall telling my wife that I needed to make sure that I had the keys to their house. I've always had keys to my parents' house, and being in California, then I don't use them that often, so I had to make sure that before we left the house and headed to the airport that I had the keys. And I did have the keys with me. And when I got to the house, actually on the way to the house from the airport, the keys were buried in my backpack. And my daughter happens to be staying at my parents' house for the holiday weekend as well, home from school. So I text her and said, when I get close, I need you to open the door because my keys are buried down in my backpack. And so I need you to be there to open the door for your mother and I when we get there. Needless to say that when I got there, she opened the door. And then I checked my backpack just to make sure that I had my keys. Which brings me to this. My wife's mother is ill. And when we went to visit her, my wife said to her, "Your prayer warrior is here." And my mother-in-law looked at me, and she had like a little smile on her face. And then my wife said, "Can you please pray for Mama?" So I said, "Okay, not a problem." I began to pray for her and began to petition God and ask God that He would do complete healing in her life and in her body. And as I was praying, just as I was finished praying, the Lord came to me and gave me Matthew 16 and 19, And it says, "And I will give unto you the keys of the kingdom of heaven, and whatsoever thou shalt bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and whatsoever thou shalt loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven." I've read that scripture many times, studied it in many different capacities, whether I was teaching or ministering from that particular scripture. I have read it, I have studied it, and I always seem to focus each time that I read it and I studied was on the binding on earth and it being bound in heaven, and loosing on earth and it being loosed in heaven. And my attention was always on that because as I studied it, I always noticed that whatever we bind on earth is already bound in heaven, which means that God gives you permission to take care of things here on earth and He will fulfill it in heaven. So whatever you bind on earth, He will bound it in heaven. And whatever you loose on earth, He will loose in heaven. But before you get to that point, Jesus says, "I will give unto you the keys of the kingdom of heaven," which means that binding and loosing, there is a lock that is associated with binding and loosing. And in order to unlock that, in order to open that, you have to have the keys. However, if you lose those keys, you don't have the authority to bind or loose. And if I had lost my parents' keys and it just so happened that my daughter was there, but if my daughter was not there and my parents were asleep at the time that we came in, I would have had to use my keys in order to get into the house. And the reason why the keys were important because it gives me the authority to enter into my parents' house. Lil Nuku, whatever your name is, you need to go somewhere and sit down. So I got the understanding that Jesus gives us the keys in order to bind and to loose. And as I was praying for my mother-in-law, and after I finished praying for my mother-in-law, I realized that it is my relationship that allows me to have the keys in order to bind in heaven and loose in heaven. And having done so, I am given the authority to speak healing into my mother-in-law's situation. I want you to know today that you should not lose your keys. Make sure you don't lose your keys because your keys gives you the authority to open up what you need for God to do for you. If you need God to heal, if you need God to deliver, you need him to make a way, you need him to restore, you need him to renew, you need him to revive. If you have the keys, you have the authority for all those things to happen. However, if you don't have the keys, you're locked out, which means you don't have the authority to enter. And you have to wait for someone who has the keys to allow you to enter. Now, it would have been a sad thing getting to my parents' house at nearly midnight last night after flying all day across the country to have to stand outside in the cold and be and knocking on the door feverishly for someone to come open the door for me because I don't have the authority to enter into my mom and my dad's house. But because my mom and dad gave me the authority a long time ago to come and go as I please, because they gave me the keys, that would not have been a problem on last night. I want you to know today that if Jesus has given you the keys, make sure you take care of those keys. Make sure you value those keys. The worst thing that ever happened to me, and I was in grade school at the time, my sister and I, we would come home before my parents after school. And I recall one time that we got on the bus, rode all the way home, made it all the way home. And as I got to the front door, I reached in my pocket, couldn't find my keys. I looked at my backpack, I couldn't find my keys. I asked my sister, did I give you my keys? She said, no, you didn't give me your keys. And we did not have our key. My mom and dad had not made it home from work yet. And we were standing on the front porch without able to get into the house. I realized then the importance and the value of protecting the keys that my mom and dad had entrusted me to have. You know what I did? We only had enough money, really, to ride the bus from school home. But somehow or another, I was able to scrounge up enough money to get back on the bus, go all the way back to school, go in my locker and get the keys, and then have someone, parents, to drive us back home for us to get in the house before my mom and dad got home. Because if my mom and dad had got home and we were locked out of the house because I misplaced my keys, that would have been a whole nother issue. I probably would have gotten in trouble. Not probably, I more than likely would have been in trouble. But because I had the keys, I had the authority to enter the house, but I had to make sure that I valued the keys themselves that gave me the authority to enter into the house. So today I want you to go back and read Matthew 16 and 19 and understand that Jesus has given you the keys to the kingdom of heaven. And those keys allow you to bind and to loose. And whatever you bind on earth has already been bound in heaven. And whatever you loose on earth has already been loosed in heaven. God bless you, and make sure that you hold on to your keys.